Hey everyone, welcome to lesson number 5. Today we're going to go over some additional forms which can be included to your purchase contract as well as will be part of the process to complete your offer to purchase. Whether you're a buyer or representing a buyer or a seller, these forms are important and you need to know what you're waiting for and you need to know what you need to do. We're going to go over an addendum, sale of buyer home, consumer relationship guide, amendments, receipt of funds, waivers, non-waivers, and seller void option. So let's get right on into it. Here we have the addendum. So what an addendum is, it's an additional form that gets attached to your purchase contract before it has been completely agreed upon by both the buyer and the seller. So this is where you would see that it's translated over from our previous purchase agreement. But this is where you would more than likely go 9.2 additional terms, and you would write in whatever you want. So whether you want cleaning to be done, if you're looking at a new build and there's a long list of things that need to be complete, or you're looking at having a long laundry list of items to be completed, this is where you would put it. As well, this is where you could be talking about an RPR or specific things about the property. Whatever additional things that won't fit on the standard purchase agreement is what gets added to an addendum. Now, it's important to remember an addendum is adding a paper to the purchase contract. So once the purchase contract is complete and accepted, you cannot add an addendum without an amendment. An amendment is a change to agreed upon purchase agreement or purchase contract. An addendum is an additional form to be attached to the purchase agreement or purchase contract. Hope that makes sense. So this is where you would fill it out. As you can see, has both the buyer and seller here that have to agree on whatever is being added in, because it does form part of the purchase contract. See, this document forms part of purchase contract number. So this is an addendum. Not overly commonly used, however, they are used more often on new builds or when a property needs significant work to be up to your buyer's or seller's standard. So this is an addendum. This is your sale of buyer's property schedule. So you'll remember back on the purchase contract, we talked about a sale of buyer's home condition. This is then the form that gets attached with it. So what you'll see here is you'll have the sellers, the buyers of the property that's being purchased or that gets attached to the purchase agreement, because again, this document forms part of purchase contract here. This is then where you're writing the buyer's property that they're looking at selling. So what's its address? Where is it? Is it already currently listed on the MLS? So which board, which brokerage, what is the asking price? Or will it be listed on MLS will be listed on the MLS system, again, which board, and then within blah, 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 hours of notice of acceptance of this contract as follows, brokerage, yada, yada, asking price, not more than whatever you put it for. So this here would be how many hours until the property is actually going to be listed on MLS. So normally, if you know a property is good to go, you can probably get it listed quite quickly. However, if you still need to do all your marketing for it and all that, you would have to extend that out. Now, a seller may not want it to take an extended period of time before it goes on, where a buyer might still need some time to get the property ready. This goes into your preparation and conversations with your buyer ahead of time to make sure that if you know you're going to be writing an offer subject to the sale of their property, that you have their property pretty well ready to go in a very quick manner so that when you do get an accepted offer, you can put this in and have that ready and off to the races you go. So this is how long it will take until the property is actually physically listed on MLS. This is which brokerage will be listing it. and this is what the asking price will be. If you have someone moving here and you're not, like let's say they're moving from BC and you will not be able to have their property listed, then you would put the other brokerage here and what the amount is that it is going to be listed for. Until the buyer provides written notice of waiver or satisfaction of all buyer conditions in this contract, the seller may continue to market the property, authorize the seller's brokerage to disclose the existence of the sale of buyer's property condition and the time allowed for buyer waiver below, and accept another offer or purchase contract that may contain buyer conditions. Basically means the seller has the right to continue to market the property and has the right to accept any other offers. 1.6, this is how, if another offer accepted by the seller, this is how many hours notice the buyer still has to complete their sale and remove all of their conditions. So as a buyer's rep, you would be wanting to push this number out to 96 hours, so 4 days. As a seller's rep, you would want this to be as low as possible, maybe 24 days. But this is where you would put that agreed upon number, right? If the seller accepts another offer, they then must give written notice, which is the buyer's notice, to the seller. If the buyer gives written notice, buyer's notice to the seller within the time frame waiving all conditions above, then the contract is enforceable. Otherwise, the contract will end. Meaning, if the buyer doesn't waive all conditions, this current contract expires. 1.8, if the buyer gives written notice of waiver or satisfaction of sale of buyer's condition before the seller provides the seller's notice to waive all of the buyer's conditions under 1.6, then the condition date for any other condition will be as agreed upon in the contract. Meaning, if you waive your sale of buyer's home condition, but you still have other conditions, and you waive that before you receive the buyer's notice, then, or seller's notice, sorry, then doesn't matter if they've accepted the other offer, they can't fulfill it until you still have the option to go through. If you've received that seller's notice, then all conditions have to be waived. That clock also begins once you have received it. And receiving means receiving it in your email box, not getting a text saying, hey, we've invoked it, but actually receiving a copy of the seller's notice. Both buyers and sellers will have to sign this as it is part of the purchase contract, and they have to agree upon all the terms that will be here. Now we have the Consumer Relationship Guide. The Consumer Relationship Guide is needed with all of your people, whether it's a client or a customer, whether it's a buyer or a seller, it does not matter. Every single person needs to have signed a customer or consumer relationship guide. This guide is what's referred to in all of your other documents. So make sure you're very aware of everything that's in here. This is what explains the difference between customer status and client status, what a relationship is, what agency is, what common law versus designated agency is. So this guide is incredibly important to give definition of what your duties and what your job is in relation to the customer or client. So make sure you know everything. However, your major points here is undivided loyalty, confidentiality, full disclosure, obedience, reasonable care and skill, and full accounting. As well, it goes over your conflict of interest, working for the transaction, and where to go if they have any complaints. Again, this document is incredibly important and must be provided and signed up front at the very beginning to explain your relationship status with either your customers or your clients. If you're getting a relationship or a representation agreement signed, this needs to be signed at the same time or before the representation agreement is signed. If you're representing someone and they're writing on a property that is unrepresented and the seller or buyer is going to be operating as a customer, they still must sign this because they must have a full understanding of what your duty is to them, regardless of them being a customer or a client. So this is an amendment. Like I was mentioning earlier, an amendment is a change to an existing accepted purchase contract. So you'll again see that this document forms part of the purchase contract. So that's why having a purchase contract number is so important. It flows through to all your other documents. Again, you'll have the same sellers and buyers, but this is where you delete something. So you can be something as simple as deleting the purchase price, right? So you would go 2.1, purchase price of, let's just, as our example, we had a purchase price of 400,000, and then we go 2.1, price of 395,000. So then we would have buyer and seller sign to agree, and then this is how you would change the purchase price. You can do the same thing for eliminating a condition. You can add in, if you're needing to get rid of one buyer or adding a buyer. If you're adding a buyer, what you would do is you would keep this free, and then you would just go insert buyer's name, and then insert new buyer name. All new buyers then would have to sell. Sign. Same if you're removing a buyer, right? So if we're deleting a buyer, every buyer goes up here. Every buyer then has to sign to agree that they're removing a buyer off the purchase contract. So whether all people are buying, or if you're adding a new buyer or removing a buyer, everyone needs to sign. Everyone needs to sign, both as the sellers and the buyers as well, if you're making any changes to the purchase contract. So it could be, like I was mentioning, purchase price. It could be that you're inserting 9.2 additional terms, right? And you could be adding in a cleaning clause. You could be adding in that they're repairing something. You could be adding in that they're going to provide something or whatever. Again, we have that standard clauses that can be used to add in things. But this is where you would insert that. That's where you would delete things. So you could be, if you're wanting to extend a condition, what you would do is 8.2a financing condition dated or due, let's just say December 22nd, 2022. 8.2a financing condition due December 29th, 2022. Right? So then that's how you do it. So you're deleting the old condition, and now you're inserting a new condition with a specific time. And you would want to put at p.m. 9 p.m. So then that way you have a specific time that it was supposed to be removed by, and now when the new condition is to be removed by. So this is an amendment. Again, this is a change to an existing accepted purchase contract. If you're still negotiating and you're wanting to add in a form, that is an addendum. This is the receipt of funds. So a receipt of funds is not needed if you are the seller and we're holding deposit. If our brokerage is holding deposit, you do not need a receipt of funds. As well, if you are the deposit is being held in a lawyer's trust, a receipt of funds is not required. But if the deposit is being held by another brokerage, then a receipt of funds is required. So you would put the transaction property, the date, then the amount. If there's multiple deposits, they would go here. So our previous example, it was $10,000. It's Canadian currency. When date of receipt of funds, so when did we receive it? Right? Was it a check, certified check, cash? We do not accept cash. We do not accept wire transfers. So was it a bank draft or an e-transfer? Was it delivered in person? Was it mailed or was it electronic? Right? So let's say it was a bank draft delivered in person. Purpose of funds, initial deposit. Right? And when you scroll down, this is you should try and get the account information. If they provide you a check, it's the stuff that's at the bottom, so it's quite simple. If it's a bank draft, e-transfer, wire, anything like that, it will be very difficult for you to get it. However, it is asked that you still try and get as much information as possible. If you're not able to get it, you have to put client did not provide. So again, this is receipt of funds. It is a 2-page document, and it is you need to fill it out if our brokerage is not holding the deposit. And it needs to be done when you get the deposit and bring it to the other brokerage. Congratulations! You're about to waive all of your conditions. This means the property is about to become officially sold. So what do you have to do? Well, again, you need the contract number. You need everyone's names. If you've done any amendments and added anyone new to the purchase contract, they must be here. Both buyers and sellers can have conditions. So whether are you the buyer or are you the seller? And then which conditions are you waiving? So if you're doing 8.2, buyer's conditions, A, financing, and let's just say you also had B, home inspection. Now you've waived both of your conditions. Congratulations, the home is now sold. This one only needs to be signed by the party that is removing their condition. So if you have a seller's condition, the sellers would sign this document. If you have a buyer's condition, the buyers would be responsible for signing this document. They need to sign and date it and send it to the other side. It is not considered received or sold until the other party receives the document. So you have to make sure that it's signed and dated prior to the condition removal time, and it must be received by the other party or other brokerage prior to that condition date. So if you had 9 p.m. on Friday and you had this dated for a Thursday, but you didn't send it to them until Saturday, doesn't matter. The contract is now void, even though your buyer or seller had signed the condition remover or waiver. Doesn't matter. It wasn't received by the other party before the condition removal date. So you must make sure your people are signing it prior to the condition removal date and the other side receives it prior to the condition removal date. One way you can ensure this is to put the other side to receive a copy of the waiver once it has been signed through DocuSign, AuthentiSign. That is one way to ensure that as soon as it's signed, it's received. However, sometimes your people are willing to sign it, but they don't want to waive their conditions just yet because they might be wanting to wait or hear on something before, but they're comfortable. They just want one final little piece of information. So they might sign it before, but then tell you to send it later. So in that example, it wouldn't be a great thing to do. But again, whether you're the buyer or seller, you can have conditions. So that's what you pick here. This is only signed by whichever party is waiving their conditions. This is then where you write your conditions, be as very clear and concise as possible. So if you have seller's conditions, you would write seller's conditions. Or if you had additional ones, sale, buyer, home, additional buyer's conditions, doesn't matter. Those can all go in here. Once all conditions are removed, then the property is sold. And congratulations, you have the sale. Just like the waiver of conditions, this is a non-waiver of conditions. So this means that either your buyer or your seller has made the decision that they do not want to pursue the purchase contract or continue with the purchase contract. They are not waiving their conditions, meaning the deal is now going to be dead. So just like the waiver, everyone needs to be on here, needs to have the MLS or the purchase contract number. again, only needs to be signed by the party that is not waiving their condition. And this one, you have to type in either buyer or seller. Again, you would write in which condition it is. So 8.2, buyer's condition. And let's say they just didn't get approved for financing, right? So then that's the condition they are not waiving. So then once this is signed and sent over to the other party, the deal is officially dead. If your client changes their mind after this has been sent to the other brokerage, too bad, you're going to have to write a brand new purchase contract. Same as if you send a waiver over to the other side and it's being received and they then change their mind, too bad, that sale is going through. Remember back when I was talking about that you needed to get that deposit in on time, otherwise the seller had the option to void the contract? Well, this is the form the seller would use to void the contract. So you'll see here, not everything translates on this one because we were going back in through the seller's one, but you see your sellers here, right? Purchase contract would go here, seller's names would go here, you would write the buyer's name, and then I, the seller, void the contract due to buyer's failure to pay a deposit. You do not need to put anything in here. Just signing, dating, and sending it over will then void the purchase contract. If the deposit is received prior to the other side if the deposit is received prior to the buyer receiving this document, then the contract continues. If the buyer is late on the deposit and receives this before they get the deposit in, the contract is voided, the property is back to active and being marketed again for sale. This one is not an overly common occurrence. However, when you are representing sellers, you need to know what document to sign to void the contract, and you need to keep your sellers aware or informed if the deposit is late. It's because they need to know they can invoke this as an option. So you got to be on top of your game. Make sure you're keeping your clients informed with all aspects of the transaction. So there you have it. We have gone through 8 forms that get added into a purchase contract. So now you know everything you need to know about how to get your clients signed up, get your offers written, and then what you need on an offer to continue through with it. You're going to be off to the races. I'm excited to see where your career goes. As always, ask me, ask your broker about any questions you have through the process. I'm excited for your career. Thank you for taking this course. Have a great day, guys. See you.